Jessie, hello, and welcome to the Internet of Learning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How has your week been? Anything exciting over the last 5 to 10 days?
We had a really engaged conversation at the senior leadership table with the president on Tuesday, which was really interesting to me. In that we sat down and had a really deliberate conversation around what's going well and where we can do better. And I really appreciated the opportunity to just have that kind of deliberate, creative tension conversation from a really honest, trusting place with our senior leaders.
I love that creative tension. I'm going to ask you more about that, but I have an embarrassing admission to make, but hopefully you won't mind. So when we met maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, whatever it's been, I had printed out your campus engagement report for Transform IT, and now wherever I go, I actually travel with this and like share it with other CIOs and leaders throughout the country. So I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, I guess, is like the hashtag that's trending these days. But it's incredible. It's like a 30 or 40, maybe 50-page document that just walks through all aspects of IT, and all of your findings within Oregon. So I want to start with this. Like, why did you do this? How did you get in your role? But why did you start with this engagement report?
Sure.
Who put it together? Because it's incredible. And then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you. I think that's an incredible compliment, and the credit really goes to our project management team. When I started, we had a very nascent project management organization. We actually had a project management team of one, and one of the first things that I did was make the case that if we were going to really re-envision what IT could be on this campus in order to meet our strategic goals, that we had to really hire some professional project management and business analysis folks. And so we started with that, and then we took the campus engagement approach. And so it kind of starts with the backstory that when I started, we had the recognition that we really had to take a hard look at how we were handling distributed and centralized IT on campus and do more with the available resources that we have. We had a tremendous amount of demand. We have the Phil and Penny Knight campus for accelerating scientific impact. The Knights gave us $500 million to advance science from the bench to practical application at a faster pace. And it's extraordinary. And in order to hire the caliber of faculty to support that transformational gift, in order to meet our student success goals, technology is at the heart of all of that. And we are in a place in Oregon, like in many states, where we're very challenged from a funding perspective, and we recognized that there was a lot of work being done on campus that was duplicative, and we have a tremendous amount of talent, and we need to be able to deal with it more effectively. And so we had actually had 4 different consulting reports between 2012 and 2017 when I started that indicated that we needed to really re-envision how we dealt with IT. All of those reports were from a personnel and an org chart perspective. And I really felt like if we were going to enact change and do it well, we needed to look at it from the perspective of services, not from schools. And so I asked our project management team to go out and work with campus to deliver this report. It was an incredibly collaborative effort, and my intent was to be able to take a service-based view of what's really happening on campus.
Yeah, and the findings in this are so well done. And, without going through each one of it, I found that the analysis was broken out across a lot of different services. And I noticed help desk was like right at the top on almost every single page. Desktop support, business applications, network management round out the top 4 or 5. So when you start to aggregate this data, you use the word enact change. How do you take all of this data and information and then create process to enact change? And what is your goal outcome of that change, right? So you have the information. How do you analyze it? How do you create a solution to it? And then how do you present like to the president? Here's what happens after you make these types of investments.
Absolutely. So it's a really interesting process in which I really don't think that I have any business sitting in my office and determining what change looks like without my partners on campus. And so I have spent what's almost 2 years now engaging deeply with our deans and senior leaders and our IT directors around campus to participate in the process. So once we had finished the campus engagement report, we actually hosted a 2-day workshop, and it was about 60 folks on campus, all of our IT directors. We asked them to each bring 2 staff representing our classified and unclassified folks. We invited some faculty, we invited some IT student employees, our registrar, associate deans from all the colleges, and walk through a process to define values and principles around the project, and then also how we might re-envision some of these services. So you mentioned help desk. You'll also notice that there's help desk and desktop support carved out differently, as well as computer lab management, knowledge management, accounts, and access. And those are all things that in my mind and in the minds of folks like EDUCAUSE, when we do benchmarking against our peers, are really interrelated. And so the first thing that we've done after publishing an additional draft of the report that has an appendix with all of our findings and our work out of the workshop was to start to think about how we can get the biggest benefit from those services, both to campus and in terms of improving our overall value of our IT. And so what we did is we went in front of our Transform IT steering committee, which is executive deans. We have a student represented, we have IT directors, IT staff represented, and really made a pitch that we should combine desktop, help desk, knowledge management, accounts and access, and computer lab management into a single service that we're referring to as user support services. And that's really where we are now. I presented that pitch to Transform IT Steering Committee, our overall governance bodies that we've built over the last 18 months on campus, and then finally to the board in December. And we have since put together a team that's cross-functional from folks who deliver these services around the university. And in April, they're going to come back to us and give us a new service model that will be delivering these services at scale to the university. One of the other things you notice there's just so many haves and have-nots, right? Deeply supported schools, and we have schools with no IT staff. And we've really got to be able to rising tide lifts all boats, right? Not degrade service to those who are well-served, but raise the level of service to those who are underserved.
I mean, it's amazing, and it makes me think about our last episode where Tara, who is the CIO of a school called Ripon College in Wisconsin, so her entire school is 800 people, and her IT staff is 5. And if you listen to the episode, like, she had a lot of challenges as well, but just on a smaller scale. Tell us about your organization. How big is it? Is it centralized or decentralized? And then the second part of it, on a personal note, like, who are you and how did you become the CIO of such an awesome institution? Like, it's so impressive to see what you've done. So how big's your team? How are you operating it? And how did you get to where you are? I mean, it's awesome.
Sure. So our team, we have just about 110 FTE in information services, which is the central IT organization. And based on the campus engagement report, we estimate that we're somewhere around 30% of the total FTE on campus that are in IT.
So very decentralized.
Very decentralized. More so that I think we probably should be to take best advantage of the talents. We have incredible folks here. And it's really about, for me, it's really about the people and culture change and leadership, which is a great sort of tangential segue into your second question, which is, how did I get here? I have a somewhat unusual path to the CIO seat.
Okay.
I've never been a developer and I've never been an engineer. I had my first leadership job at the age of 21, and I've never really looked back. I happened to do that job across my career. I spent actually a decade in the private sector. I spent time working for what was at the time a division of WebMD Business Services and later for Yahoo. But I always happened to do leadership in a tech environment. And very far back from my first job in leadership working for a small company called Pacific Interpreters, I had a bunch of kind of hands-on IT responsibilities because it was small enough that we had no IT folks and someone had to do it.
Wow.
um, and so I really have spent my career and my postgraduate education in honing my leadership skills. I firmly believe, passionately actually, that leadership itself is a discipline and an area of research and an area that without which you cannot run in a high functioning organization. And that's really how I've approached my career. I was really fortunate to have progressively responsible positions. I was at Yahoo when I finished my master's degree and started thinking about the next step. And I was actually based in Portland, Oregon, when I was at Yahoo. Although I traveled a lot, I had folks in Bangalore, India, and in Omaha,
Cool.
Nebraska, and in Portland. And I started looking for the next thing, and I didn't necessarily, my husband and I didn't really want to relocate out of the Portland area. And through, the wonders of networking, a woman who I had worked with at Yahoo in HR worked at OHSU and posted this job in IT that was a director role reporting to the CIO that was such an unusually perfect fit for the things that I had done in my career. And that was
Wow.
my first foray into higher ed in a mission-based institution, and I have never looked back. I love working in a mission-based organization.
Yeah.
It's a really cool thing to be able to connect with the work that you do at such a visible level. And it was really, I always knew that I wanted to be in an executive leadership role. I didn't know exactly what that would take, and what shape that would take. I never dreamed that I would come back to my alma mater. And it was at OHSU that I figured out that the CIO seat is where I wanted to be.
Wow.
And I went through a number of leadership development things, notably one through the Northwest Academic Computing Consortium that was really incredible, focused on developing CIOs, and was fortunate enough that when this role came available, I was selected to serve.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. And just getting to know you the last couple of weeks and months, I guess, it comes clear about how you're so focused on leadership and how your leadership qualities are really transforming the organization. And I guess for people earlier in their career like myself, you mentioned how your team is just 30% of the total staff in IT for Oregon. What's
Mm-hmm.
the game plan? So how do you start centralizing that? How do you start prioritizing which roles and functions need to come in? I mean, it's a awesome change management case study, if you will. And then the
Sure.
second piece of it is you've started to add in more leaders. Last time we talked, you mentioned you brought in a chief technology officer.
Mm-hmm.
What sparked that? What triggered you to say, this is what we really need in order for us to transform IT? So what's the game plan to centralize, and why was bringing in another executive like a CTO strategic for you?
Sure. So one of the things that was really important to me as we think about what we're doing is I actually think about rationalizing IT. Because I don't necessarily think that centralization is a magic bullet, and that we can take everyone on campus and put them in a central organization and that will solve all of the campus's IT challenges. And so we really very intentionally talk about rationalization, and we use the campus engagement report to help inform that. We started with a number of projects actually over the last 2 years that have come along sort of organically. We needed to replace our classroom scheduling system, and we had 3 or 4 of them around campus. And so we worked together and found a collaborative way to partner with those organizations that were running the various distributed systems, had our safety and risk services folks really advocate for a single one where we can really leverage it for campus safety, and really smoothly replaced that and had it live and ready to schedule this upcoming spring term. And that sort of thing, and having those kind of low, politically concerning projects go well and create wins,
Yeah.
help create trust. And so we leveraged a number of those things and creating other wins for campus. We have a number of distributed email platforms And we had not offered alumni email for life before, and that turned out to be something that our deans and colleges were really interested in. And so we were able to create the opportunity to have students have email for life after graduation, as long as we got rid of all of the extraneous non-exchange based email platforms. And so we've been working toward that, and that's been something that historically has been really challenging here to get done. So we took a combination approach of, let's tackle some of these things that everyone agrees needs to be done and that are easy to get wins around. Do what we say we are going to do when we say we're going to do it, get some wins, and then really look at the things that are the highest labor and dollars and the highest demand. Research is another place that we really need to focus technology maturity. We have a great high performance computing cluster that is run by a director out of the vice president for research's office. And we're dealing with kind of the meat and potatoes support for research through Transform IT and the User Support Services project, but we have this middle tier of stuff that isn't really well served today. So a lot of that storage, and we hear from faculty, and we heard through campus engagement that that's one of their biggest needs. And so combining both the big bang for the buck in terms of labor and dollars and being able to redeploy some resources with figuring out how to close the gap on some service issues around research has been a really compelling story to tell. And so I don't think that there's a one-size-fits-all approach. You really have to understand your campus culture and what you can use to figure out how to gain trust and have folks believe in the message that you have and want to come along.
I love all of that. I mean, one of the biggest takeaways I had from what you just said is rationalizing IT. Your goal isn't just to centralize the world. It's to rationalize your way into what should be centralized and what's not. And I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it. I also liked how you talked about easy and early wins. So I think you said the low politically challenging aspects of it to create trust, and then you get win, 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 and it allows you to refocus on highest labor, highest dollar, and research, which is hyper core and strategic to the university's goals. So dialing deeper into that, one, the CTO came on. So is his goal then, once you solve those quick wins, to focus on the big ticket items like the laborers and the things that are big dollar amount? Or is his role really to innovate around the student experience? I mean, we've kind of seen both of that nationally. So what is his role? And then the second part of it is, how are you going to start? I mean, just for the listeners, help desk, you spend almost $6 million a year, desktop almost $6 million a year, network management almost $5 million a year. I mean, these are big dollar amounts.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to start looking at that? So CTO's role and your top three spends are each, $6 and $5 million. How do you start looking at becoming more efficient in those worlds?
Sure. So our CTO, when we had a position open up, in summer of 17, and I took the opportunity to really rethink what we wanted out of our executive team in information services. And we've never had a CTO on campus. And as we're trying to figure out what the right application of technology and strategy are for us, I really felt like that was a critical position. In a perfect world, we'd be able to afford a CTO that was strictly focused on tech strategy, emerging technologies, innovating around the student's experience, and not have to deal with the operational side of the technology infrastructure team.
Right.
But we are funding constrained, like many of our peers around the nation, and we can't afford to have both of those executive positions in IT. And so I was really looking for a hybrid and someone who could lead both the operational execution of our technology infrastructure group and be able to partner and apply the right technology strategy and innovation to my overall campus IT vision for where we have to go as an institution. And so it's really that hybrid approach that I'm looking for, and I think that we've found that right balance. It was a long time. I was starting to feel like hiring a CTO and recruiting for one was a permanent part of my job description. But I'm thrilled that now we have our CTO who actually came to us from the University of Montana where he served as CIO. And we are moving forward in ways that I don't think that this campus has been able to before for a variety of reasons. And our leadership team is across the campus is really new. We have really new deans. Our president has been here, I think, going into his 4th year now. We have a relatively new vice president for research. And are looking around the leadership table, I'm incredibly impressed and grateful that we have the folks that we do.
No, I love it. And I think we're going to start seeing what you're doing more and more in higher ed, where the need for a CTO that's actually hybrid. And I think that's a better fit for higher ed because it's partly trend setting, it's partly establishing and understanding the strategy, but then also how you implement it. And I guess it leads me back to the second question around the big ticket items, right? So how do you start looking at the big ticket items where they clearly impact the entire organization, like help desk or desktop support, but it's also changing so drastically. Like with help desk especially, you're going to start seeing more chat bots, and you're going to start seeing, you know, hey Alexa, my computer doesn't work. What can I do?
Right.
Automation. So how do you operationalize it to create efficiency, but also be in the forefront of innovating around help desk support?
You know, one of the fun things that I think we have an opportunity to do, and we're trying to do on a number of fronts at the university, is as we're making tactical decisions to improve our maturity in a number of places, we can learn from what our peers have done and try to take a leap forward and skip the middle part. And you know, chatbots are a great example of that. You know, we are going to be working on, we've hired an associate vice president for online education for the first time on campus, and are really working on how to coalesce around a strategy to deliver online education effectively to our students. And that, of course, has a huge technology component, and it has support considerations. That if we're going to have an online footprint of students, a tech desk that's open from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday doesn't really work. And so starting to think about how we can leverage chat and chat bots and working through those processes will be something that we do in conjunction with the big ticket items because they can't be done alone. And the biggest thing, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, is that it has to be done collaboratively and in partnership with all the folks who are impacted. So what we've done is that the same project management team that produced the report is leading the user support services re-envisioning for campus. And we have participation from each and every school and college that has IT, that currently, and administrative unit that delivers those services today. And we're starting to coalesce around how we envision them. And the stage that we're at right now is we're starting to think about things in terms of core, common, and unique services. Right. So core being those help desk, desktop support services that everybody gets, no matter who you are and what kind of a role you have here. Everyone has a banner account. Everyone has an email address. And then next would be, what are the things that are common, so most folks have. And then finally, the things that are unique are truly unique to units. So a great example is we have a school of music and dance, and in that we have a piano lab. That's a very unique technology application that isn't enterprise service by any means. And so starting to figure out how do we deliver core services and common services at scale and stay entirely connected to those unique services so that we can create deep communities of practice. And we're doing that in a team-based collaborative fashion. We've agreed in principle that we need to deliver core and common at scale. And so we now have the goal of what does that look like and how do we deliver that service in the best possible way for our campus. And that's really the stage that we're at now and how we're tackling these big things. I really believe from a leadership perspective, the very best way to get through challenging projects like this are to have folks who are involved and impacted have a stake and a say and an opportunity to be part of the solution.
If we were in person, I'd give you like 1,000 high fives, and I'm feeling core, common, and unique. I mean, that is such a simple yet tangible way of explaining it. And I think every higher ed institution needs to start thinking of it that way, right? Like we have core function, we have common function, but the unique part of it is the innovation that creates paradigm shifts. Like a piano lab is so spectacular, and it's a great example where not everyone plays the piano at University of Oregon, but there's ways of creating and leveraging technology to deliver such a unique experience to that piano student who probably came to Oregon for a larger, scale education, but piano is something that they're hyper passionate about. I mean, I love that, and I want to switch gears to something that is a little bit more personal, if you're okay.
Sure.
You mentioned the term creative tension at the very beginning, and I love it. And on a personal note, I'm very lucky. My mom was one of the first, or not first, but one of the few female engineers to graduate from MIT in the 80s. And my incredible wife is a physician. So, like, I am surrounded by strong, brilliant women, much smarter and stronger than me. But in technology and STEM, it's still an uphill battle. I mean, creative tension is a great way of saying it. You probably face that way more than your counterparts do. And actually, working for Marissa Mayer is a perfect example of someone who's got a lot of creative tension that was headed her way when she was CEO. So, how do you handle that? What are some advantages and challenges of being a woman CIO and leader? And what advice do you have for some of the directors or associates or women early in their career that want to get through some of the unfortunate glass ceilings that still exist in technology and STEM?
Sure, absolutely. And I really appreciate the question. It's diversity of all kinds, including gender diversity, is a really important cornerstone of what we're trying to do here at the university, and it's a personal value of mine as well. And I think for me, I've had a really different experience than I think women in these fields a half a generation or a generation before. But there is certainly still challenge, and a lot of that is that, as you allude, I think that we have fewer STEM students who are female coming up out of K-12, and we have to address and figure out how to encourage young girls at an early age to explore math and science if they're passionate about it, and technology. And I think that that's changing because technology is such an integral part of the experience of a child now. I'm really hopeful that we'll see more of that. When I was a kid, it was an entirely different experience than the digital natives that are coming into our freshman years here at the university, and the internet has been a totally accepted part of their lives since they were born, and that's a really different thing than even for me. And so I'm really hopeful that that'll help. And I had great women mentors, and a strong mother who encouraged me to go after whatever it is that I wanted to do. And I think that that's my best advice for women who have that interest, is that there's absolutely nothing that you can't accomplish if you go after the education and the experience. And having mentors, I think, was really powerful. That was a big part of what helped me. And being able to see women who were in roles that I wanted to be in and understand that, and have the opportunity to ask them about their journey. And part of it, I think we have an obligation too, as leaders, to make sure that we hire for diversity. It's,
Yeah.
as you note, I think it's a deliberate thing that we have to do to help change the fact that women are underrepresented in technology fields. And we make a really deliberate attempt to create job descriptions that are not unintentionally written in ways that discourage applicants of color or female applicants.
Right.
And then also make sure that we're pursuing those applicants in different advertising platforms as well, so that we can pull a really diverse applicant pool. And Oregon, unfortunately, isn't a terribly diverse place. And so
Right.
I think if we don't take responsibility to try to create the demand and the openings too, it'll be a never-ending cycle. I think it's not enough to simply say that it should be better, but we have to actively participate in how to change it.
I love all of that, and I think it's spot on. And one of the things that I guess I've always wanted to ask, but what advice do you have for men as women continue to grow into more leadership positions, right? Like, how do you become a good employee to a woman boss, and a good coworker? What's some advice that you have for the men out there that are seeing more women in STEM?
Honestly, I think it's just creating an environment of mutual respect, and that it doesn't, to me, it doesn't have anything to do with being a woman or being a person, for folks who happen to be persons of color. A it's a respect and a basic consideration for those around you. And I think that if you do that at all levels, as whomever you are, that will take you a long way. And so for me, I don't feel like there's anything that I need to be interacted with in any way that's different than anyone else. Make the assumption that we're all highly competent and that we're all here to give each other feedback and to push each other and help each other. And, that creative tension and the ability to really be willing to ask questions when you are concerned about something and also take feedback is incredibly important, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
So I don't think, for me, it's not gender-based. It's just being both a good coworker and a good colleague and a good employee in general.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think part of where I feel we also need to emphasize, and you call it creative tension, I like it. I think a part of that, though, is being comfortable in confrontation, being comfortable in environments where people are different, and it's okay to be different, but it's also okay to discuss the differences. Like, I find, and I don't want to get too deep into this rabbit hole, but in modern time, like, we sometimes avoid confrontation, and I think that's can be relatively unhealthy. But if you can confront each other in a respectful way,
yep,
it bubbles up into some really, really awesome outcomes. I want to be conscientious of your time. I have one more really tough question. It's really, really hard, though. Like, if you don't feel comfortable, don't ask it. But when we visited, you talked a lot about the night school, and I'm not kidding. I'm a big basketball fan. I love it. But I originally thought, like, why does she keep on talking about, like, night school in terms of, like, day and night? But then I realized it's the night school. How much cool free Nike stuff do you get? What's your favorite piece of Nike gear? Have you met Phil Knight? And I really want some Nike stuff.
Well, I do not actually get free Nike gear.
What?
However, my office is across the street from the Duck store, and so my favorite piece of Nike gear right now is this kind of mid-leg length raincoat that has an O on it, and it's great because it's Oregon winters right now, and I wear it literally every day. It's fantastic. So I haven't actually met Phil Knight. I was in an elevator with him once, but and down on the football field a couple of times, but I haven't had the opportunity to sit down with him in a room. No, not yet.
Well, I almost met him. I rejected my D1 basketball scholarship offer at University of Oregon, and he actually called me to recruit me, but I decided to launch this podcast instead. Well, anyways, you are amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I personally learned a lot. I loved the major themes of this around core, common, and unique, and how you use the campus engagement report to really not only assess the state of operation, but how you go through a massive change management process to deliver the outcomes that your president and constituents and students are really looking towards. And I think for me, the biggest part of this, though, is that leadership is what's driving this. Not once did you mention, oh, we bought this piece of software and it solved all of our problems. It was quite the opposite, actually. It was around people, leadership, and culture. So thank you so much. Please don't hang up after I stop recording. I'd love to catch up a little bit more. And up next after this episode, we're going to have a big change. We're inviting Derek Jackson from Kansas State, who manages their housing and auxiliary services. Thanks again, Jessie, and talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.